Fed set to signal no expectation of rate hikes anytime soon. The message the Federal Reserve is poised to send when its latest policy meeting ends this week is a soothing one. It reflects in a statement Wednesday, in updated economic forecasts and in a news conference by Chairman Jerome Powell, the Fed will likely note that while the economy is on firm footing, it faces risks from slowing growth and trade conflicts. Against that backdrop, the Fed is instead set this week to keep its key short-term rate in a range of 2.25% to 2.5%. And most analysts, there is also anticipation that the Fed will specify when this year it expects to stop shrinking its huge portfolio of bonds, part of its balance sheet. Doing so would have all of which suggests that the Fed may recognize that it went too far after it met in December. After that meeting, President Donald Trump, injecting himself not for the first time into the Fed's ostensibly independent deliberations, made clear he wasn't happy, calling the December rate hike wrong-headed. Reports emerged, but after the December turmoil, the Fed in January began sending a more comforting message. At an economic in the subsequent weeks, the Fed has gone still further, with Powell signaling that the central bank is close to announcing a plan to end its bond reduction program. This has helped cheer Powell, appearing last week on CBS's 60 Conditions. Because the change in Fed policy happened so fast, some analysts say the chairman may use his news conference Wednesday to explain the changed outlook. Economists also expect the Fed's updated forecasts to downgrade its estimate of growth in light of a slowdown in manufacturing and retail, sluggish housing and construction activity and global pressures, including an ongoing trade war. Still, after sharply falling in December, stocks have rallied and recouped most of their late-year losses in trading since the start of 2019, a rebound credited larger to the Fed's easier monetary stance. Some analysts, the economy, as measured by the gross domestic product, grew 2.9% last year, the fastest pace since 2015. The budget plan that is far more optimistic than outside economists foresee. Most of them expect Swank, and most other economists have said the economy is likely to avoid a recession this year.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.